Hello, you've decided you'd like to give Mosaic Overlay Crochet a go. So the good news is you don't need lots of expensive equipment. In fact, everything I use for most of my projects is right here on my table. So hello, I'm Angela from the Pattern Scribe. In the last episode, we talked about what Mosaic Overlay Crochet actually is. And today we're looking at the tools and materials you'll need before you start your first project. Let's start with yarn, because this is probably the question I'm asked most often. Is there a special yarn I need for Mosaic Overlay Crochet? The answer is no. You can pretty much use any yarn you like. I use Stylecraft Special Double Knit quite a lot for the majority of my patterns. I also use Wendy Supreme Double Knit. Not generally together, but obviously in the same pattern I use the same brand. I like them because they're affordable, they're available in lots of lovely colours, and it's nice to work with and easy to replace if you run out halfway through a project. The most important thing isn't actually the brand, it's the contrast. You want your colours to stand out against each other. So obviously this navy and blue work very well together because they contrast. If you have two similar colours, then obviously not so much. Your design will still be there, but the colours won't really pop. If we look at crochet hooks, I think it's quite common now that I like the Addy crochet hooks. I'll put a link in the section below if you want to have a look at those. I generally use 3.5mm hook for double knit, but that's simply my preference and works for my gauge. The right hook for you depends on your yarn and your tension. I tend to like these because they're ergonomically shaped and work well with my hands, where I've got a couple of conditions with my hands. Always check your pattern because it will tell you the recommended hook size and gauge. So don't worry if your favourite hook is a different size, that's absolutely fine. Now scissors, I tend to just use, I think these were scissors that came with an embroidery machine, but they are nice and sharp and snip easily for me. You'll definitely need some scissors. In standard Mosaic Overlay Crochet, we cut the yarn at the end of every row. So unlike some crochet projects where your scissors stay in the bag, these will be getting plenty of use. So yarn needles, I usually use a little needle out of one of these sets because it's easy to keep and it doesn't get lost in my yarn bag. So these are for sewing in the ends once you've finished. If you're planning to do an envelope border, you'll have fewer ends to sew in, but we'll cover that in future lesson. The next thing that we tend to need is stitch markers. But it's probably where you'll find different opinions. Some crocheters absolutely love them. Personally, I rarely use them for Mosaic Crochet. They help when you've got repeating patterns, but if you don't use them, don't worry. Now your pattern, I don't think I've got one printed off, but what we tend to do is follow written instructions or a chart. Now I've got my chart here again. As I say, I like the digital aspect of working. Saves paper, printing, ink, supplies, etc. I do prefer the digital apps. Some people like the written instructions, but a lot of people use a bit of both too. So you've got the flexibility to work in whatever way suits you. Now, when we're working at a chart, if it looks a little intimidating, don't panic. If I can zoom in a little bit here, that's gone. So you're not expected to understand this yet, and that's exactly what this series is for. We'll break it down step by step and before long you'll be reading charts with confidence. Other extras, let me think, are probably a project bag, a notebook maybe for writing notes down if you're a pen and paper person, and the best thing is my coffee. So project bag to keep everything together, your notebook if you want to make notes, good lighting, a good place to sit, and a decent cuppa. I'd say that's probably the most important bit. So let's recap quickly. To get started, you'll need yarn, a crochet hook, scissors, a yarn needle, and your pattern. And that's really about it. You don't need a cupboard full of fancy gadgets. And those basics will get you ready to start. In the next episode, we're going to look at charts and written patterns, and I'll explain how they work together before we start breaking down the chart itself. So once you understand that, everything else becomes much easier. So until next time, keep your hook moving, your stitches even, and remember, every chart tells a story. Happy crocheting!